Wonderful. Well, then I'll kind of go over the session agenda. I had planned to do kind of a deep dive into our history, but I think we can kind of skip over that and kind of move into the student and educator and organizational opportunities. But I'll just provide a brief history of the Parliament, and then Kekashan will talk a little bit about her experience as a student and now as an involved trustee as well. And then Emma will kindly walk us through some of the opportunities for educators and institutions at the Parliament Convening. So as you all seem to know, the Parliament of the World's Religions is what we consider to be the world's largest and most diverse and inclusive interfaith convening of people of faith, spirituality, and goodwill. And we are an organization, a 501c3 by the same name, and we're actually headquartered in Chicago, which is where I'm joining you from. And we boast a historic legacy that dates back to the 1893 World Parliament. So the World's Parliament of Religions was hosted as part of the World's Fair in 1893. And for many, it's considered the birthplace of the interfaith movement because it was really the first global conference that brought together Western and Eastern traditions. And so our organization was born out of that legacy. The Parliament of the World's Religions was actually incorporated in 1988 in the city of Chicago under the name of the Council for a Parliament of the World's Religions. And we were really originally organized to celebrate the centennial of the 1893 World's Fair and the 1893 World's Parliament. And kind of their slogan at the time was, "There's no better time than now for this to happen again." At the time, it was really meant to just be a celebration and a centenary observance. But the 1983 Parliament was an immense success. It gathered over 8,000 attendees in Chicago, global, local, national, and it actually brought forth a lot of high-level speakers like His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and an assembly of 250 religious leaders who came together to sign the Global Ethic, which is the foundational document for our organization. And it was actually historic in many ways, but primarily because it also saw the first participation of Indigenous, Sikh, and pagan leaders in the main Parliament stage, which they had not been afforded that same participation in the original 1893 Parliament convening. So with that success, our organization was born with a mission to cultivate harmony among the world's religious and spiritual communities and to foster their engagement with the world and its guiding institutions around what we call our critical issues and our critical constituencies. So peace and justice, the global ethic, climate action, and our critical constituencies, which are Indigenous people, the next generation, and youth, and then women and girls and their dignity within the religious and spiritual communities of the world. And so the Parliament convenings have really been our organization's primary method of achieving our mission. So our global convenings, like I said, have gathered internationally renowned world leaders, but they've also gathered grassroots organizers. They've gathered people who maybe don't consider themselves people of faith, but just believe that the world's communities have something to offer. And organizing with them and convening with them can really make a difference in the world. So we've hosted conferences in Chicago, which is our home base, but also in Cape Town, South Africa, Barcelona, Spain, Melbourne, Australia, Salt Lake City, Utah, Toronto, Canada. Then we had our virtual conference in 2021, and now we're returning to Chicago in 2023. So our 2023 convening is happening this year, August 14th through the 18th at the McCormick Lakeside Center. And what we are saying is we're addressing the most urgent and critical global issues of our time, which are freedom, democracy, and human rights. And of course, we're also celebrating 130 years of history, which I think is going to be a very special anniversary to come back to where the global interfaith movement was born in Chicago. So if you will allow me, I'd like to play a short clip from our promotional video, if it allows me.
In 1893, religious leaders from around the globe came together in Chicago for the first Parliament of the World's Religions. The meeting was a groundbreaking gathering of representatives of Eastern and Western spiritual traditions. Today, it is recognized as the birth of interfaith dialogue worldwide. 100 years later, at the 1993 Parliament in Chicago, religious leaders came together again to affirm the Declaration Towards a Global Ethic. The Declaration is a powerful statement of the ethical common ground shared by the world's religious and spiritual traditions. Now, 30 years later, representatives of the world's religious traditions will once again gather in Chicago to affirm human rights and the productive discourse that comes from interfaith dialogue.
The 2023 Parliament convening in Chicago will address one of the foundational issues of our time, the threat to freedom and human rights. We must defend freedom and human rights together and find solutions to the rise of autocracy in our world. Through this lens, gathered participants will discuss the threat to democracy, the crisis of climate change, the dignity of women and girls, the rights of Indigenous peoples, engaging the next generation, peace, justice, the reduction of inequalities, and more. The Parliament will be a place of open minds and open hearts, where we can all express the wonder and dignity of our religious and spiritual traditions against the backdrop of the majestic beauty of Lake Michigan.
The world was called to Chicago in 1893 and 1993. 30 years later, the world is called again. Join us. Get involved today by becoming an exhibitor or sponsor, joining the Parade of Faiths, hosting a pre-Parliament event, or volunteering at the 2023 Parliament.
All are welcome. Register now.
Right, I guess not. All right, well, it's a very nice promo video that has a little bit of our history, and it's a call to action to return to the city of Chicago for faith, spiritual, and civic leaders who are really passionate about both the theme of our 2023 conference and, of course, in convening with the world's religious and spiritual communities. I'm going to just give you a moment to pull up the presentation again. But I wanted to share a little bit about what makes the Parliament, in our opinion, such a life-changing experience, which is what a lot of our attendees have said in the past, and it sounds like some of you have had that same experience as well, which is really the diversity in the kind of opportunities that emerge during these communities, right? Because we're both, I think, we like to balance between being a really strong academic conference, so we have a lot of really strong opportunities for academics, for organizations doing a lot of great civic and religious work, but we're also really passionate about including grassroots organizers and lay people who are just passionate about the work that's being done within their communities, and being able to bridge those gaps and provide really a platform for that conversation and that dialogue to take place at our conference. So, Parliament convenings are life-changing for the attendees, but in a lot of ways are also really great opportunities for cities. In the past, we've seen a lot of great interfaith work, interfaith organizations, interfaith action and activities happening after a Parliament conference. And, anecdotally, we've had a lot of attendees and even some of our trustees who have now become trustees say, after I attended a Parliament conference, after hearing what an individual can do, what a community can do, what an institution can do, I've taken what I've heard and I've gone back to my own community to empower them and say, this is something that we can make a difference on. So I think both for individuals, for students, for educators, and for institutions, the Parliament provides a really great opportunity to not just hear the dialogue and be part of the dialogue, but then take that into their own community and make a difference in their own ways. Which is why we think the 2023 Parliament theme is so powerful and so important. I think there's so many global issues that are happening within the intersections of these issues. And we think that religious communities, we think that students within the scope of religious and civic studies to really make a difference and to really lead dialogue in the ways that we can make a difference in protecting human rights and advancing democracy and making sure that freedom is something that is upheld for all of our humanity. And as we've seen emerge as well, for all of Earth as well, like climate change animal rights. A lot of those topics are emerging as well within the communities that are attending the Parliament of the World's Religion. So actually for the 2023 conference, these are some of the tracks that we'll be covering. We actually have about 600 plus programs that we're working on getting scheduled. We just some of the final confirmations of all of our programs, and primarily the programs will be focusing on faith and democracy, the city of Chicago, both as our host, but also in the historic legacy that it serves to the Parliament of the World's Religions, faith and interfaith understanding, which are the core of our mission, peace and justice, climate action, global ethics, and again, our critical issues in our constituencies, Indigenous peoples, the next generation, women's dignity, and freedom and human rights. And then, yeah, I figured I could share a little bit again about what it is to be a life-changing experience. So as you'll see some of these pictures, attorneys really kind of shape how they experience the problem, right? It's such a broad program that, again, at the core, you get to hear some amazing experiences from these global leaders, but you also get to be culturally immersed with a lot of the religious and spiritual communities that make diversity of our attendees. And of course, a lot of what students and educators have done in the past is really use the Parliament to gather with themselves, with their fellow students, but also just create a networking community of people who are passionate about interfaith work in that regard. So it looks like our videos aren't working, but I can always share this presentation with you after the fact. So I'll go ahead and turn it over to Ketishan, who can talk about student opportunities and the NextGen programming and her experience with the Parliament of the World's Religion.
Awesome. Thank you, Miriam, and hello again, everyone. So my engagement with the Parliament has always been, like for me, like I've always been a student engaging with the Parliament. I'm currently a graduate student. I'm an MBA candidate at Cornell University's Graduate School of Management. When I first engaged with the Parliament, it was in 2018 at the Toronto Parliament. I'm coincidentally from Toronto as well. And I had just graduated high school then. And it was really, first of all, such a wonderful experience to be at a gathering of passionate, like-minded people who wanted to work together to create harmony, interfaith harmony, peace. And it was also really wonderful to see how all of these other intersections of interfaith harmony with achieving peace and justice, achieving women's empowerment, environmental justice, how they were all explored. And that was kind of where I came in when I was invited to speak there. It was on the work that I was doing as the founder president of Green Hope Foundation, which is a global social innovation enterprise, and the work that my team and I were doing in terms of working towards interfaith harmony and their intersection with nuclear disarmament, with social justice, environmental conservation, working together with people of all faiths and religions who've been impacted by environmental disasters, social inequities. And really, it was nice to see that I was actually able to share some of the work that my teams and I had done with people of literally every faith wanting to create a better world for all, to protect their planet and achieve peace and harmony. So then after I spoke at the Parliament, I realized that the engagement did not have to stop there. And I started getting more and more involved with them. After that, I got involved with the NextGen task force, and it was just really wonderful to see the intersection of like students, young people getting involved more and more in the interfaith movement. And then it was really the greatest honor to be elected as a trustee, the youngest trustee of the Parliament ever. And when I was named the Next Generation Task Force chair, I thought that, this was really a blessing in disguise, because it was like a way for me to help contribute to make sure that more and more young people got involved in the interfaith movement and really trying to create a better world for all and achieve interfaith harmony. So the NextGen Task Force basically is a way for young people and students to get involved in the interfaith movement, to share their views and perspectives at the Parliament, meet other passionate people, who are working towards this interfaith cooperation, who are taking actions within their own spheres of influence. And it's just a really great way to share best practices and localize within communities. And I'd say that there's a lot of different ways that you can get involved with the NextGen task force. You can connect with a lot of different people. So you have faith leaders, you have community organizers working on the ground, experts, and really engaging in whatever way you kind of want to engage in, whether that's in a religious or spiritual way, or more, with working on the ground in like civic observances. And it's really a way for all young people to kind of just harness that innate passion that I think our generation has to create this better world for all. So I think this parliament, with the theme that Miriam was talking about and the experience that was being spoken about, I think that it's really a wonderful way to just get young people involved to meet, as I keep saying, meet other like-minded folks and just connect with the global and local interfaith movement. So I think this parliament is just, the theme is just so relevant to what we as young people have been calling for quite some time now. And I think that having this parliament and making sure that we engage more and more young people, it's just there's a lot of opportunity for you to get involved. So I'm really excited about that. And I hope that you continue to engage in the interfaith movement and engage at our parliament.
Thank you, Ketishan. And as you see on the presentation, we tend to have an average of about 1,000 what we call students. So these are typically elementary school through college. Undergrad is our primary kind of number, but we do like to work with the local communities to also engage a lot of high school students, and then of course parents and some of the local kind of communities also bring a lot of young kids as well to kind of get an immersive experience and connect with attendees as well. So now I'd like to turn over the presentation to my colleague Emma, who will talk a little bit about the feedback from educators, but also some of the opportunities for institutions.
So looking forward to our 2023 convening this year in Chicago. There's several ways for students and educational institutions to get involved. Of course, the best way is to attend the Parliament and bring students. In past years, several different universities have brought cohorts of students to attend the convenings. Syracuse University educator Rebecca Kantrowitz brought a group of students and shared with us that after coming back from the experience, the students just came back so much more connected and so much more, understanding what they can do on their campus and with a greater commitment for the work that they were doing on campus as part of an interfaith group on campus. Next slide, another educator that brought a group of students was Bob Saltz with the University of Wisconsin Stout, who shared with us that every single one of his students that he brought called the event life-changing. And they shared that it was so profound to be in a place where they're not just hearing about religious diversity in an academic setting, but really seeing it with their own eyes, and in a place where it's all in one place. And seeing what they really want the world to look like. So bringing students to the Parliament, the registration rates, we're currently in a discounted advance rate. And then with student ID, students get a further discounted rate of currently $125. And when educational institutions bring a group of students a group of at least 5, then the educators or staff coming with those students also get that student rate. And that's also the group rates are also a great way to go, because if you don't know exactly what students you're going to be bringing ahead of time, you can just reserve a block number of registrations and then fill in those names later. Another area that's great for students and for educational institutions to get involved with is the exhibit hall at the Parliament. The exhibit hall has hundreds of organizations. So for students attending, this is a great place to really see, they might be studying, well, for me, I came to the Parliament for the Toronto convening shortly after I had graduated with a religious studies undergraduate degree. And for me, when I was in school, I wasn't quite sure how my degree was going to be used in the real world. But seeing this exhibit hall where you have hundreds of nonprofit, religious, interfaith organizations and learning about their work, that was what I really saw, like just how much is out there, just how much work is out there being done. It's also, the exhibit hall has educational institutions that exhibit to share about their undergraduate and graduate programs. So for example, currently in the exhibit hall, we have some interfaith seminaries, chaplaincy institutes, and then some divinity schools, religious-based universities. And then continuing to the next slide, another great opportunity for students is to volunteer at the Parliament, especially being over the summer this year. Volunteering is a great way to really get a hands-on service learning kind of experience where they can see what it's like to put on an interfaith convening and get that hands-on experience. It's also a great way to attend at a lower registration rate, as volunteers have a reduced discounted registration rate of $50. And then another way for educational institutions to get involved in the lead up and all the momentum around Parliament convenings is hosting a pre-Parliament event. So before every Parliament convening, there are pre-Parliament events that happen both in the local host city of where the convening is going to take place and around the world, and nowadays virtually. So these events are interfaith events, fairs, community events, service projects. They really can be anything that gives a taste of what the Parliament and what the interfaith movement is. And they really, they're critical for bringing the impact of the Parliament convenings and the interfaith movement into the communities locally and globally. And then they also just build that momentum and excitement. Thank you.
Thank you, Emma. And you'll have handouts, so I don't think I need to keep this slide up. But I thought it'd be great if we kind of open up the program to questions, feedbacks, and then actually I think it'd be great for us to kind of maybe talk about the theme of the Ripple Conference as well, and the ways that the Parliament, in a lot of ways, is kind of really addressing the theme, right, about how we can stretch beyond our religious identities in this really diverse, multi-faith world. Are there any questions or comments? Yeah.
I have a question of logistics. Have you connected with local hotels, and are there discounted rates available? Do we just get that through the website?
Yes, yeah. So we have hotel blocks. Right now, our primary one is the Hyatt, which is the one directly connected to McCormick Place. So that has a special block for Parliament attendees. And then we'll be adding probably another one with the nearby Hilton, which we'll be announcing soon. But yes, we try to have hotel blocks available for our attendees, just because it's a big city, but hopefully our blocks kind of offer a more affordable option for our participants.
Thank you.
Yeah.
If someone signs up to volunteer, is there like a set number of hours that they volunteer? How does that part work?
Yeah, typically we ask for a 20-hour commitment. We can be flexible. Sometimes our presenters, they want to present, but also they want to volunteer. sometimes we're a little more flexible in terms of hours of commitment then, because they'll also be participating in their programs. But yes, typically it's 20 hours during the week.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Any other questions?
Is it possible to get this this presentation sent to us?
Yeah, absolutely. Ivy, would you be okay with us?
Send it to me, I can send it out.
Yeah, wonderful. I can do that. All right. Well, there's no other questions. Maybe would you be comfortable sharing some of your experiences at the Parliament? Was there anything specific that you found really enriching, or if you were a student or educator at the time that you thought, wow, the Parliament did this really well, or I wish I could have taken better advantage of some of the offerings at the time?
Yeah, so I was working in religious education in a congregational setting, but in our congregation, our choir director was the director of the choir for the Salt Lake Parliament. So they secured a group rate, and someone couldn't go at the last minute, so I ended up going. And if I had known how good friendly it was to students, I would have wanted to like bring at least my high school group, if not more. I particularly loved the Langar lunch. Like, I had never experienced that before. And we would run a program each year on neighboring faiths. But it just seemed like this would be like getting it all at once in 1 week and actually getting to know people. So it was really lovely, and the choir was great. I mean, I don't know, it was just such a great like feeling to see all of these diverse people in Salt Lake City, all with this purpose to be, working together, to get to know each other, to, make connections. Yeah, it was just, I mean, I know that sounds really vague in general, but I loved how they incorporated into the programming some very local specific issues like Mormon feminism and things like that are important to me. So I was afraid that it was just going to be this group swooping in and talking about interfaith, but not talking about what was happening right around me. So that was cool too.
Good to hear. Yeah. Yeah, and I will say, I think, and Emma might be able to share some of her experience in Capuchin as well. She's from Toronto, so she was there in the Toronto conference. But I think, we are an international conference, so we do rely very heavily on the support and kind of the commitments of the local community. So part of why we always say, a dedicated track to the local community is really important. It's because we don't just want to come in and say, we're the institution that knows everything, right? Like the local communities have their own diversity and their own interfaith movements, and the way that they work is just as important as the way that the global and international movement works as well. So I'm really happy to hear that was a really powerful experience, and that you were, really glad to see that happen. I mean, I wasn't on site in Toronto, Capuchin, but I think the Toronto community was also very, very well represented, I think, in the.
Absolutely. I think that Toronto itself, being obviously a very interfaith city and having a very strong interfaith movement, but kind of to see that reflected in this in that gathering, it was just really wonderful. And to speak to your experiences as well, like when I'd heard so much about the Parliament and how it was started and what it was all like, but to actually see it in person and just see that just amazing diversity, not just of people from coming in from all around the world, but also like the local diversity being reflected. Yeah, it was just really, really wonderful. And I was like, okay, I feel very proud that it's happening in my city. But yeah, the diversity and the learnings that you can gain from that it never gets old. Like whenever we have the Parliament, even with the virtual Parliament, we were in the middle of a pandemic and we were connecting with people from across the world with this goal to achieve interfaith harmony. But even then there was so much of learning that was going on, and there's so much of diversity. So it's always a wonderful experiential feeling. So yeah.
And I will say we will have Langar as well. It's not going to look exactly like it was in Salt Lake City, but we're very excited that Langar is kind of a staple at the Parliament. So I've heard that a lot, but that's kind of a really great, both immersive, but I think it's just a great opportunity for people to kind of sit down and experience what other faiths are doing. So yes, absolutely. I think that's a crowd favorite as well.
Yeah.
Speaking to local engagement, engaging the local community and local issues is always a value and an emphasis in Parliament convenings, but also having a lasting impact on the local communities where convenings are hosted. So looking to our history, one thing that always sticks out to me as incredible is the 2009 Melbourne convening. The Melbourne area is made up of, I think, 40 cities make up the metro area of Melbourne. And before the Parliament convening, I think there were maybe 3 of those cities that had interfaith councils, groups, organizations representing those cities. After the Parliament convening, that went up to 37 of the 40 cities, which is incredible. This year, some things that we're doing to try and emphasize lasting impact in Chicago is having service projects that we're doing around Chicago, and also having some events as part of the convening that are open to the public, to be more visible to the public eye of Chicagoans. That's going to include a pre-Parliament event, which is a parade of faiths, which will really highlight the local Chicago religious communities. And then also the concert that we typically have, we're planning to have out for the public out at a park this time.
May I ask, is there any opportunity for students that might come from wherever, for example, my university at Queen's, for them to be enrolled in a program that would enhance their leadership credibility, even perhaps taking a course there that was crafted so that they could get a certificate of interfaith leadership that they could then apply, have in their portfolios to bring back, and we could set up some accountability to use that on campus or in our community. Is there anything like that designed, embedded into the Parliament?
We don't have any accredited certificates this year. In Toronto, we actually did have an accredited, I can't remember the exact title of it, but it was an accreditation of learning about Indigenous people's spirituality. That's not exactly what the title was, but yeah, this year we don't have anything that is accredited. Fortunately, just with Toronto, there was a local institution that was able to do that. But with the program of this convening, there's definitely a lot of sessions that are emphasizing leadership for students, interfaith leadership. So definitely a lot of leadership skill gaining, just not in an accredited way.
Yeah, but that's a great question. I mean, that's something that maybe we can take back to our team and see if that's something that might be possible. I mean, again, we're not an academic institution, so we don't really have the capacity to say we can certify, I think, in the traditional way. But yeah, I think with the diversity of the program, and I know in Toronto we did this at the NextGen track, we had like a designated tab that we identified programs that we thought, these programs look like they're going to be a really powerful leadership experience, or they're going to have a lot of focus on like intergenerational conversations and the way that can be shaped in your community, that kind of made up a NextGen kind of subtrack, if you will. Again, no actual accreditation, but I think that was something that we were able to offer a lot of young people to say, if this is something you're passionate about, we encourage you to participate in these. And I think maybe that's something that professors or chaplains could maybe, as they look through the diversity of the program, say like, I think these 10 programs will be really powerful for my students to experience, because they're by organizations that are very well known. They have their own accreditation, perhaps. I think that's one way to kind of do that without, again, the academic kind of accreditation. the Parliament doesn't have. But I'd be happy to kind of take that question back to our team and see if that's something that we might be able to offer in the future.
Thank you.
All right, wonderful. Well, I think if no one else has any other questions, or if you'd like to share anything about, the connection with the Ripple team this year, was there anything else?
I think I don't know a whole lot about Parliament, but was intrigued to hear from y'all because, yeah, I mean, the Ripple conference is much smaller. We have about 100 participants, but very focused on the student leadership and the student kind of centric aspect of having a conference that is this size in this locality, and that our audience is other institutions in the area. But that having the possibility of educators bringing groups to different conferences and experiencing their faith in different ways is really intriguing to me. And our Ripple conference theme is so broad of a personal experiences with religion, that I think, this, and I know the Interfaith America Leadership Institute is also in August in Chicago, looking at possibilities of bringing students and having educators kind of figure out how to involve students in this work. That's really the meat of Ripple conference is getting students exposed to difference and interested in interfaith, that even if they're not ready or experienced to really do the deep dive of the work, to have a kind of safe entry point to be able to move on to bigger things. So I appreciate you giving us this information.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for hosting us. I mean, again, we were kind of late, but you were very welcoming. And I think that's kind of the power, right, of conferences like yours and conferences like Interfaith America or the Parliament, right? It's the idea that people of faith, they believe in their tradition, or, but it's not just a belief, right? It's the idea that their own tradition drives them to say there's value and dignity in other traditions, even if they're different from my own. And I believe that dialogue is possible. I think that's a very powerful thing to engage young people and students in, because, sometimes that dialogue is lost, for the idea that religions are just kind of constant conflict, are kind of represented very heavily in the media and across social media as well. So I think there's a very kind of visionary kind of work that comes with these types of conferences, both yours and ours, to say, it's possible, right? Division happens, but also, dialogue happens, and especially with younger generations, being able to say, even if you're not religious, or even if you're not spiritual, or even if you maybe don't necessarily believe in a specific faith, if you're passionate about social issues and social causes and the roles that people can play in making a difference, and these conferences are a great starting point. So absolutely, thank you so much for allowing us to participate.